and I'm here to offer commentary on some of today's current events. And as you can see in the title, this is one that has been very much talked about over the last, I would say, when you're talking about Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, over the last couple of years, he's been very, very much in the spotlight. Now, just to preface this conversation, um, Deion Sanders and myself are about the same age. And the first when I was exposed or knew about Deion Sanders is when he was a college football player at the Florida State University, and I had kind of mixed opinions of him. He's a very um, I don't want to use the word flamboyant, but he's always been super outspoken, very kind of flashy and gaudy. I remember there was an article about him in Sports Illustrated, and back this was back in the '80s, of course. And he would wear a lot of gold chains. He was from Florida, had a jerry curl. A lot of people from Florida in that area had similar styles, and he was very, very outspoken. And I remember they would talk about his jewelry, and they would spell the word jewelry JEWRY or something along those lines. But it was very he was a very colorful personality. And like I said, at first I was not a huge fan of it because of his flashy style and how he was very outspoken, and it seemed like he was very braggadocious in how he would approach himself, which is a little bit different than myself. But again, I wasn't a huge fan of it in the beginning, but then he was very compelling and always has been very compelling. And the more you look at him and really hear what he says, it caused me to change my opinion of him as a man and as a football player. Some of you probably know, if you've watched football at all, Deion Sanders is considered one of the greatest football players, one of the greatest athletes to ever put on some cleats. Not only was he a great football player, played for the Dallas Cowboys, he played for the San Francisco 49ers. He won Super Bowls with both of those. He played for the Atlanta Falcons, and later on, he played for the Baltimore Ravens late in his career. But he was such an impactful player on the field that he played for. I'm trying to think which one he played for first. I think he played for San Francisco first, and they beat the Dallas Cowboys because Deion Sanders neutralized the Dallas wide receivers. And then the next year, he got traded to the other team, and the other team won. And so, again, he was just such an impactful football player that he commanded respect. He commanded your attention all the time on the field. Also, his style was very over the top. He was very well known for his dances. When he would score a touchdown, he would dance. And one of the things that I always kind of paid attention to with him is that there was a lot of times he would do what's called a pick six. So he was playing defensive back. He would intercept the ball. And because he intercepted the ball, he was able to take the ball into the end zone and score a touchdown for his team. And a lot of times he was so confident, or even when he would run a punt returns, he was so confident that he would start celebrating even before he got in the end zone. And so maybe 10, 15 yards out, he would start his dance even before he got in the end zone. So he was very an enigmatic figure. You either loved him or hated him. Very outspoken and those type of things. But I say all that to say that when I see how he's acting now, how he carries himself now, and how there's so much backlash, it's I would say somewhat confusing, and I'll go into a little bit more detail of it. But what I would say is that he's always been the same way. He's never changed. From a college football player, very outspoken, very flashy, to an NFL football player, Hall of Famer, Super Bowl champion. His personality was always the same, very outspoken, would speak his mind, never heard of any kind of controversy around him off the field. He now is very open and honest about his Christianity. He's been a public speaker for a while, commentator, and all these type of things. So we've seen him. He's been the same all of this time, but now he's very much getting criticized for how he's carrying himself. And part of it is jealousy. Part of it is people hating on him, because it's one thing when you can talk the talk, but it's another thing when you back it up with your efforts. And like he said, he's won at every level. He's been a winner in college. He was a winner in the pros, and even he was such a great athlete that he also played Major League Baseball as well, and even played in the World Series. And so not only was he a great football player, he was a great baseball player as well. And I think he's a great human being from what I know of him. I don't know him personally, but from what I've seen of him, again, haven't heard anything off the field that is controversial. He hasn't gotten any trouble. You've never heard of him drugs or anything like that. And so he seems like a very solid guy. When you look at his family, he's a family man. His children are very successful as well. And as a matter of fact, his son is the starting quarterback for Colorado, and he's now in the Heisman candidate talk, right? He threw for 500 yards against the number 17 team in the country, TCU, and also a ranked team, Nebraska. He threw for almost 400 yards. So very successful. And again, like I said, with Prime, he not only talks the talk, but he walks the walk. He's very positive and uplifting and all those type of things. Nothing bad about that I can, no criticism that I can see about him from that end. Now, there's also this very popular, you can call him a podcaster, journalist, a former college football player by the name of Jason Whitlock. And recently, he made some comments, or has been making comments as it pertains to Deion Sanders. Now, about Jason Whitlock, as I said, Jason Whitlock, Deion Sanders, and myself were all basically the same age. And I agree with a lot of things that Jason Whitlock stands for. Jason Whitlock is very open about his Christianity and how he views the culture, and I agree with him on a lot of things. However, there's a couple of things, and I was a little bit surprised at how he, how he's been really going at Deion Sanders. I don't know if he's, and I believe he's sincere, because from what I see, he usually speaks his mind, even if it's not popular. But it's kind of disheartening the way he's going at Deion Sanders, some of the criticisms of him. And I'm going to share some of these things from his show. He has a show called Fearless. And this is from an article that's talking about what he has said. He's also had some former NFL players on his show, and they were recently talking and debating about Deion Sanders. But this part, I'm going to talk about the part that I disagree with Jason Whitlock, and then I'm going to talk about the part that I agree. And then I'm going to go into a little bit more about HBCUs and college football and different things. And so that's really the purpose of this conversation. And because Deion Sanders and the Colorado football team is such a big deal right now, everybody's talking about all sports shows, even people in the public. You go different places, and people who are into football, this is a very popular topic to talk about. So I'm gonna read part of this from this article talking about Jason Whitlock's commentary on his show Fearless. Deion Sanders is no doubt a polarizing figure in the world of American sports. The Colorado coach has come under criticism on many occasions for his behavior on and off the field. Prime time, and this is not my words, this is from this article. Prime time has been under the limelight since the Buffaloes upset TCU 45-42. TCU is Texas Christian University on Saturday. So this article is about a little bit over or about a week old. Sports columnist and podcaster Jason Whitlock is the latest to hit out at Coach Prime in the last few days. On the Fearless with Jason Whitlock podcast, the former Ball State offensive lineman criticized Sanders for his lack of maturity. This is a quote from Jason Whitlock, and this is what I was saying I disagree with him on. His take on this. Despite his athletic success, wealth, natural charm, and good looks, Deion Sanders is actually insanely insecure, Whitlock said. He camouflages his self-doubt with gold chains, bluster, and bullying. He's 56, which is the same age that I am. He's 56 and insisted people refer to him as Prime, a secular, materialistic character he created as a child at Florida State. The lack of evolution and maturity are stunning. Now, that was what Jason Whitlock said, and I disagree with that. As I said, it is his personality. I don't really see it as being immature. He's just very outspoken and very flashy in how he presents himself. And, I've never seen him or known him to be, talking about people, insulting people, or anything like that. It's more about positivity. He talks about how he believes in himself. So when Jason Whitlock says that he's very insecure, I don't really think that it doesn't come across to me as insecure, because what would he have to be insecure about? The man is very wealthy, very popular. He's at the top of his game. Like he said, he's won at all levels. No one can doubt the greatness of his athletic ability. And now he came in and he's demonstrating that he's also a great coach. He went to Jackson State University. There was an unknown, little known, I should say, HBCU. He wanted He took his team and made them a winning program, even with little resources. And now he's at Colorado, which is, a school that is in a top tier, what they call Power Five conference. He's beaten two very good teams. When he played TCU, it was a very close game, and they won 45-42. But they beat Nebraska handily, and those are two very good programs. And they look good. The team is looking good. His son is playing excellent football. And so for his behavior to be categorized as being as lacking maturity, to me, I don't get that. That's not how I would address it. I mean, that's Jason's opinion and he's entitled to it, but I wouldn't see how a person would be insecure. I think that Deion has demonstrated he's very secure because he is who he is. He puts it all out there, and he's made these bold proclamations ahead of time as far as his team being successful, and he's come through every time. Even when he played in football, and one of the things I've heard him say, and I would attest to this, is he never criticized the other guys or went after his opponent. He always just talked about himself and what he would do, that he had the will, he would outwork people. So he touts hard work, he touts his faith. He says that God made him. And so nobody can tear him down because he's like, you guys didn't make me, so you can't break me, basically. And I'm paraphrasing what he said. And so I don't understand why it would be categorized as insecure. Now, what I would say is part of the problem with the powers that be. He has also, and we'll talk about NIL a little bit, name, image, and likeness. But he used unorthodox methods, so they have this thing called the transfer portal that in times past, it was more difficult to transfer from one school to the other. And many times when you transferred from one school to the other, you would have to sit out a year, but they've changed the rules in the NCAA. And so a lot of these players, he was able to recruit, even some of them that came from other schools. And even his son came with him from another college. And so that's a pretty new dynamic, because before, as I said before, and I remember with Penn State, I live in Pennsylvania. And so with Penn State, when they had the whole controversy with Jerry Sandusky and Joe Paterno, they kind of shifted the rules of being able to transfer to a different school without having to set out a year. And so he's using the rules to his advantage, which is what you're supposed to do. He's challenging some of the big programs that have consistently brought in more money and won titles or won championships, right? So he's now affecting those people. I heard Nick Saban, who's one of the greatest coaches ever from the University of Alabama, and he was very critical about Deion Sanders, which I thought was interesting. But anyway. So I don't agree with that assessment that he is insanely insecure. I don't know him personally. That's just my take on him. And because you know a person over a long period of time, like I said, when I first came across him, this was back in the 80s. When I was in college, he was in college. And he's pretty much has been the same throughout. That's for over 40, 30, 40 years that I have been made aware of him. He's been pretty much the same. Now, here's what I do agree with Jason Whitlock's comments. He says, Deion hasn't surrendered to that fact yet. Whitlock said, it's disappointing, but he's rarely confronted with any hard truth. He loves the lies and dopamine of social media. It's where he hunts for recruits and develops his worldview. Twitter has convinced Sanders that white football fans and coaches feel threatened by his skin color and ascension to head coach at a Power 5 school. Now, the reason I don't agree with every part of that statement, but the part that I do, that it was kind of disappointing, is after his win against TCU, he immediately, this is talking about Coach Prime now, immediately defaulted to that people were against him because of the color of his skin and that he's a black coach and all these black players. I didn't feel that way. I don't think that was the right time or the right take on it. I think that many people, because people have loved Deion for a long time when he was a football player for the Cowboys and for the 49ers, very popular. I think it's more so his personality that can rub people the wrong way. Again, I don't have a problem with him and how he carries himself. I don't have a problem with him being very, outspoken and flamboyant and whatever he feels like he does. It doesn't affect me or anybody like that, or it doesn't affect me at all, how he carries himself. I don't see any kind of harm that he's doing for anybody. I don't agree with the fact. I think that part of what we have to understand, especially as people of color, is that it usually comes to money and control that people are fighting for, money and control. And because some of these other schools that have dominated in football, because college athletics, it's a money thing. They make the schools, the colleges make a lot of money off of these programs. You have these huge schools that bring in millions and millions of dollars for the university. And some of these schools that probably have been on top for a long time are now feeling threatened because of what Deion's doing. And it's changing the landscape of the game. Um, and because of the fact that, people aren't going to like you when you come. And, years ago, I tell you, when I was younger, my grandfather really used to like Muhammad Ali. And like back in the 70s and when he was at the top of his game, he liked Muhammad Ali, not only because he was such a great fighter, but he also liked his personality. He was very entertaining and engaging. It reminds me a little bit of Coach Prime. But there was a lot of people that disliked him because he would brag, he was very arrogant and those type of things. And I just thought it was entertaining, and especially because he would back up what he said. And when you really listen to him, even though you didn't like this, you might not have liked the style per se, but the fact of the matter is he was backing up what he said. He would tell people he was going to win the fight, even sometimes predict the round that he would win, and he would win, and so you can't argue with that. The only time I have a problem with someone with that type of personality is if they do a lot of bragging but have nothing to back it up with. And we see a lot of people like that. There's a lot of people that brag and tell you what they'll do and all this that, but they're not successful. So I have a problem with that. I have a problem with people that feel entitled. So even before something happens, they'll act like they're the best ever. Like you should just applaud me because I'm so great. I'm like, no, show us something first, prove yourself first, and then you can do all the talking that you want to do. But when you talk it and you back it up, I have no problem with that. So again, I'm not a big fan of the fact how he's focusing on the fact that that he's a black coach, and that a lot of people have, that's just my take on that particular part of it. Sure, there may be some people that don't like the fact that he's a black coach, coaching at Colorado University, or that he's becoming so successful. There's always going to be that. You can't keep people from liking you or disliking you. The only thing you can do is be your own authentic self, do the best that you can do, and let the chips fall where they may. And so I'm not a big fan of that part of it. Always focusing, on this black thing. And I've been, I've always been a proponent that says that, the only thing that should bother you when someone criticizes you is if it's true. If a lot of times it's character, it's personality, it's those type of things. And if you have a very outspoken personality, there's going to be people who do not like you, do not like your personality, especially if it's your competition. So if I was a San Francisco 49ers fan and then Deion left the 49ers and went to the Dallas Cowboys, then sure, I'm going to dislike that because he's now my opponent, right? He's helping the other team to beat the team that I like, And again, this thing with the money piece. So the NIL, some of you may or may not be familiar with that, which stands for name, image, and likeness. And it's such a good thing, in my opinion, because what it allows for is it allows these college athletes to get paid. There was recently in the women's college basketball, LSU, Louisiana State University, won the championship, and one of the star players, Angel Reese, they asked her if she wanted to go to the WNBA, and she said no because she was making too much money to go to the WNBA. And what does she mean by that? She's using her name, image, and likeness in order to profit off of herself. Now, why is that good in my estimation? These colleges have been making millions of dollars off of these athletes for many years, and the athletes themselves couldn't profit off their own name, image, and likeness. I remember there was a controversy a few years ago down in North Carolina. I believe it was Duke University. Some of their players got put on a billboard and they didn't ask permission from the university, and it was their own likeness. They didn't even have Duke on the shirts that they had on, and they got in big trouble. The NCAA used to be very, very strict on those type of things. You couldn't receive money from people. You couldn't, even in these major programs, have a job outside of your sport that you played and practicing and going to college, going to classes. And so the university was making a lot of money, even though the players weren't making a lot of money. There was some of you probably have heard of the Fab Five, and it was University of Michigan had 5 freshmen, and those freshmen were so successful right off the bat, and it was one of the first times that a major college started 5 freshmen, and they were very popular not only because of how good they played basketball. Jalen Rose, Chris Webber, and a couple other and 3 other players. And I just mentioned those 2 because those are the most Howard, Juwan Howard. He was another popular one. He's a coach now. But anyway, they were very popular because of their style and their play. And so, they wore black Nikes. They had the baggy shorts. They had all these kind of things that was very popular. And so Nike had their own brand of shoe that they sold. University of Michigan sales went up through the roof. And I remember Jalen Rose saying he was downtown in Chicago, and Michigan Avenue is a very popular street in downtown Chicago. And he said that he went to the Nike store there, and they had their picture in this huge window in the storefront, and the merchandise that they were selling that was their merchandise, right? Even had their names on the stuff. And he says it's amazing because everyone's making a whole bunch of money, millions of dollars off of us, except for us. We're the only ones who can't profit off of it. So when you think about name, image, and likeness, these athletes now can enter into deals, endorsement deals, and different things that they can make a bunch of money off themselves. And as a matter of fact, Deion Sanders' son, it's reported that he's making between $2 and $3 million off of his NIL deal, name, image, and likeness. And so just very interesting how this is happening. And so whenever you're messing with money, whenever you are upsetting or disrupting a power structure and one that brings in great wealth, you have to realize that you're going to get a lot of backlash. And so that part just is what it is. And so I like the fact that these athletes are now being able to profit off their own self and their own abilities. I like the fact that now they are they don't have to be poor. You had some of the best athletes in college. Some of them would get in trouble because they would get money from someone, a booster or somebody like that would give them money, and they would get in trouble. And a lot of these people came from poor families. I know personally, I went to the University of Pittsburgh, and I had a friend who was from Texas, and his family didn't have a lot of money. He played on the football team, and he had a hard time getting like a winter jacket or whatever. He was from Texas, didn't have a lot of winter clothes, and he didn't have a lot of money. And so, if someone were to go and buy him a jacket, a booster, or someone like that, and the NCAA found out about it, he could have, become ineligible. There was a quarterback from Ohio State years ago who needed money, sold his own stuff with his name on it in order to get money, he said, for a plane flight to go visit his family. And they took away his eligibility, and even the coach got fired. And so now when you see name, image, and likeness, I think it's a good thing because it allows these, we live in a capitalistic free market society. And if somebody's paying to see you or want to pay to see you or to endorse you or to support you, I should say, you should be able to profit off of your own name, image, and likeness. So Deion is using the rules that are in place to make his team successful. I like that. This NIL thing is really coming to the forefront and giving these athletes the ability to make money even before they become a professional. And, it's mainly football and even in basketball to a certain degree, but mainly football is one of the few things that if you are expert at what you do, you can't profit off of it until a certain period of time. So think about an actor. If you were an actor, you could be 5 years old and sign a contract and make money off of acting. We wouldn't say it would be fair for the studios to say, well, because you're only 5 years old, all this money that's coming in from you making movies or TV or whatever, you can't profit off of it until you turn 18. You would say, no, that money goes to them. Of course, they have somebody, a parent or guardian who's watching over it, but it's actually their money. We would all say that was not fair if that person couldn't profit off of their talents or people coming to see them. So I think that this is a good thing. And the other part I want to get into, and this is going to get a little bit controversial, probably, not that I'm trying to be, but what Deion did and this thing moved to Colorado and everything that he's been talking about over the last few years, it exposed the corruption and the hypocrisy, not only in the NCAA and major college sports, but also HBCUs. So and I know, and I'm not trying to offend anybody or talk about you if you went to a HBCU or if you support one. I'm just going to give you some facts and my opinion about this. Um, Most HBCUs were not in HBCUs. For those of you who don't know, it's historically black colleges and universities, and so historically black college and universities is called HBCUs, and many of them, most of them, were not even started or created by black people, right? And if you look at HBCUs, a lot of you know a lot of times it has hindered us as black people and even kept us from being able to achieve greatness, right? Um, so what do I mean by that? So if you think about HBCUs, think about the fact that 80% of the NBA is black, 70% of the NFL is black, but yet historically black colleges and universities, for the most part, the vast majority of them are very much, not only are they lack resources, but they lack excellence, right? So how come a historically black college and university doesn't usually make it to the Final Four in NCAA, or make it to the championship game in in the college football series, even though most of these NFL and NBA are predominantly black people, right? Most of them go to predominantly white, or I should say historically white universities in order to be very successful. Um, so HBCUs were created for the most part, not just to help black people to succeed. There was a time of segregation where blacks couldn't go to a white college, like the University of Alabama. There was a time where the governor of Alabama stood on the steps of the University of Alabama, George Wallace, and said, no black person will go to the University of Alabama. Now we know soon after that was changed. And now Alabama, you look at Alabama's football team, it's almost all black. So things have changed. But what I'm saying is that a lot of people that are called black leaders or whatever will support or endorse HBCUs, but yet HBCUs are usually the most underfunded universities. They lack resources. Recently, Ed Reed was at a HBCU. He really was vocal about how terrible things were and how much corruption and scandal there was. Deion Sanders, the same thing. He had a deal that he was really not getting paid that much money. And, Deion is a very wealthy person. Wasn't getting paid that much. He was even helping to support financially the school himself and buying stuff for the kids and taking care of travel and different things like that. And he had a deal with the college that if they sold tickets, if it was over a certain amount, that he was supposed to get a portion of the ticket sales. That was to help to make up for the fact that they couldn't pay him a whole lot of money. And he said consistently that they would fudge the numbers so that he wouldn't get paid what he was due, right? So that's the corruption that he was exposing. Why is it that these schools never ever are able to succeed? All these great alumni that comes from those places, how come they don't pour money back into the university? And again, I have been critical of HBCUs for years. Just because of what I saw personally and what I knew of HBCUs. Some of the people that would graduate from HBCUs would have problems getting opportunities, employment. And a lot of it wasn't just because they came from HBCU, but because they weren't really prepared like they should have been in order to succeed. So let me give you an example. There's a college called Spelman College in Atlanta, one of the more popular women's colleges, and a lot of people are very proud alumni of Spelman University. If you are, I'm not trying to throw shade at you or the college or whatever, but most people don't realize that Spelman College is named after Laura Spelman Rockefeller, who was the wife of John D. Rockefeller. Now, just so you know, and of course, this is all historical document you can find out for yourself. John D. Rockefeller and his mother were they're globalists. They had Standard Oil Company. They used to have a monopoly of oil in the United States, and the government came in and split them up because they used to call him a robber baron. And what a robber baron is a person who he was in charge of his industry. I mean, he was not in charge of his industry. He was the most successful in the oil industry, and he would use practices that would keep people from being able to compete with him. That's what a monopoly was. He cornered the market. He would buy up little smaller companies, or he would do things that would keep other people from being able to compete with him. So the government came in and they broke up Standard Oil and created 2 or 3 other oil companies. And so what Rockefeller would do, just like other people, like Bill Gates would do, is in order for them to regain a good reputation in the community, they would do uh, philanthropy. They would start a some kind of organization, and they would say that the organization was to help to do public good. Well, John Rockefeller and his mother funded what was called this was in, I think it was 1913, around that time. It was called the Bureau of Social Hygiene, and the Bureau of Social Hygiene was primarily is eugenics. If you get a chance to look up what eugenics is, they funded this lady who, from the Bureau of Social Hygiene, started the American Eugenics Society, which ultimately became Planned Parenthood by the name of Margaret Sanger. And so the Rockefellers were funding eugenics. They were eugenicists. And then Laura Spelman, who is John Dee's wife, gave money to these 2 ladies who founded, it wasn't Spelman College at first, but funded this, and then they named the school after her. It was originally Spelman before that, it had a different name. Let me read a little bit of this for you. In 1882, 2 women returned to Massachusetts to bid for more money and were introduced to wealthy Northern Baptist businessman John D. Rockefeller at a church conference in Ohio. Rockefeller was impressed with them, and in April 1884, Rockefeller visited the school. And by this time, the seminary had 600 students, 16 faculty members. It was surviving on generous donations by the Black community in Atlanta and the efforts of volunteer teachers, gifts, and supplies. Many Atlanta Black churches, philanthropists, and Black community groups raised and donated money to settle the debt of the property that had been acquired. Rockefeller's wife, Laura Spelman, her sister, Lucy Spelman, and their parents, Harvey Buell and Lucy Henry, were also supportive of the school. The Spelmans were longtime activists, and they donated the funds for what is currently the oldest building on campus, Rockefeller Hall, which was constructed in 1886. And so they named the school after Laura Spelman, which is John D. Rockefeller's wife. If you know about the Rockefellers, you know about a lot of stuff that they did. They started the Bureau of Social Hygiene, and ultimately they funded the person who founded Planned Parenthood, which Margaret Sanger was a eugenicist, and she was looked to decrease the number of Blacks and other people groups, which she called them human weeds. And that's her words, not my words. And so most of these HBCUs have this history that they were not created by or funded by people of color, that they had other benefactors. And then when we look at it now, how and I'm trying to be careful because I'm not trying to insult anyone or put anything down, anyone down, but just you have to know what your history is. When you know your history, then you should see a lot of times why things end up the way they are, right? Why do they end up? And like I said, although 80% of the NBA is Black and 70% of the NFL are Black, how come these HBCUs can't compete on a major level? Why is it that they are lacking the resources that they need in order to be successful when other schools are able to be successful? Now, I didn't go to HBCU. I went to, when I graduated from high school, I went to the University of Pittsburgh. And at the time I went there, I remember I had some friends that went to HBCU. And then after that, I lived in the South in Virginia. And so when I went to the University of Pittsburgh, and then in the South, I was exposed to what's called the CIAA. CIAA is a conference of primarily Black HBCUs, or primarily Black colleges and universities. And I thought it was interesting because when I went to the University of Pittsburgh, we were in the Big East at the time, and the Big East was arguably the best basketball conference. You had Georgetown, you had Syracuse, St. John's, University of Pittsburgh. You had these colleges, and usually there was a time, literally 1 year in particular, that out of the Final Four in the NCAA tournament, 3 of them were from the Big East tournament. The Big East conference. And so they were very successful. And I remember the Big East tournament was all about business and basketball. When you went there, the basketball was the focus, and people just went there. You see the people with their college sweatshirts on, and they would cheer for their team, and a lot of business was being done there. Potential NBA players and scouts would be there. And then at one point, I went to the CIAA tournament down in the South, and I remember I remember how the stark contrast between the Big East tournament and the CIAA tournament. The CIAA tournament was really the games were secondary. People went there. I mean, I saw people in mink coats and furs. I mean, they had furs on and all the, very flashy. It was more about the partying and the atmosphere. It was more about the entertainment and those type of things. The Big East tournament was exactly the opposite. It was all about business. And so it was just like a cultural shock. Some of these HBCU football teams, there's people that go there, don't even care about the game. They just watch the band play. They're really a lot of them are known a lot more for their band and how they entertain people than actually the play on the field. But anyway, it's just something to observe, and just wanted to comment on that a little bit. I'm not going to go into too much more detail with that, but just thought that this was a good thing to talk about and to see how this plays out. And I wish nothing but success for Deion Sanders and Colorado University, his son, and his players. I think that he has their best interest in hand. He's always been a very upstanding guy, positivity. He always talks about working harder than anybody else. He talks about God a lot. He's very family oriented. He even had a reality show where his kids, it showed how close he and his kids were and his relationships that he has with people. And so just have a very positive outlook. And it's unfortunate that, Jason Whitlock and people like him are being so critical about him. And like I said, it's not just you can criticize anyone, but it's just the type of criticism. Don't criticize him based on how you feel his personality should be. You should criticize him based on whether or not, as a sports announcer or a person like that, judge his results. Is he winning or is he not winning? Is he doing things the right way or is he not doing things the right way? This other part of calling him immature and those type of things, I think is a little bit out of bounds. And I don't think it's really necessary. But anyway, this has been Dr. Joe Green. Until next time, please, if you get a chance to subscribe to the channel and also to share this if there's anything that you got that was a benefit. I think that this is a good conversation starter if nothing else. And so anyway, until next time, peace and blessings to you. Have a great day.